Silver flashed in the first light of dawn. Not a blade, not a bullet, but a coin rolling across the scaffold planks. The crowd fell silent, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. Jory Flint stood with the noose around his neck, about to step into the void, when his gaze met the eyes of the old merchant. The same one to whom, many years ago, the boy pirate gave his last silver circle. Now that circle was back, multiplied, heavy, capable of buying off death itself. But before we understand how one coin managed to survive until this dawn, let us return to where it all began, to the alleys of Port Royal, smelling of salt, smoke and damp, where a barefoot boy first made the choice that changed his fate. The coin spun once, twice, silver flashing like a knife in the moonlight, before it clinked into the beggar's cracked wooden bowl. A single drop of Caribbean rain followed, hissing against the hot metal as if the night itself was impatient. Jory Flint never meant to save a life that evening. He was 12, barefoot, and still bleeding from a cutlass graze earned 2 ports back. His pockets rattled with stolen doubloons, but only one felt warm because it was the last coin his mother ever pressed into his palm before fever took her. He should have kept it. Instead, he watched the beggar's trembling fingers close around it like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Thunder rumbled somewhere over Port Royal, low and hungry. Somewhere deeper in the alley, a pistol hammer clicked back. Jory didn't flinch. He'd already learned that fear was a luxury orphans couldn't afford. Behind him, the Serpent's Kiss rocked gently at anchor, her black sails furled like folded wings. Tomorrow she would chase Spanish gold. Tonight, she waited for the tide, and for the boy who fed a starving stranger with the last piece of home he owned. Fast forward 15 years. Dawn bled across the same pier, but the air tasted of gunpowder instead of salt. Cannon smoke curled around the gallows like morning mist, and the noose swaying above the trapdoor looked smaller than Jory remembered. He stood on the platform now, wrists bound, coat torn, the weight of 37 crimes pressing against his ribs. 37 or 38 if you counted the mango he'd stolen the day he met Red Hand Drake. Funny how the small sins stuck harder than the big ones. Below him, Royal Marines formed a scarlet wall, bayonets gleaming like broken promises. Captain Elias, now gray-bearded and missing 2 fingers, watched from the quarterdeck, eyes unreadable. Jory's crew knelt in chains, sunburned faces streaked with grime and disbelief. They'd followed him through hurricanes and broadsides, through ports where the taverns served rum by the bucket and justice by the rope. Now the rope had come for them all. But the hangman wasn't the only figure on the platform. A hooded man stood at the edge, leather purse clutched tight. Coins clinked inside, hundreds of them, each stamped with the same silver profile that once belonged to a little boy's final keepsake. The hood shifted. A single tear tracked down a weathered cheek carved by hardship and salted by the sea. Silas Crow, carpenter, beggar, legend, met Jory's eyes and spoke without sound. "Thank you for the coin that built all of this." Jory's heart hammered against bone. He understood now. Every doubloon he'd ever stolen, every ship he'd ever sunk, every sunrise he'd chased across endless horizons had led here. To this plank, this moment, this impossible debt repaid with interest. The crowd held its breath. The drumroll began. Somewhere behind the gallows, gulls screamed like warning bells. Would you walk the plank if it meant freeing 30 men who trusted you with their lives? Would you trade your final sunrise for the chance that kindness, once planted, could bloom into salvation? The rope creaked. The drum stopped. The hangman reached for the lever. And beneath the scaffold, a single silver coin rolled to a halt, face up, catching the first light of day like a promise kept across 15 storm-tossed years. Rewind. Port Royal, 1721. A boy with sea-green eyes crouches beside a beggar whose fingers are too weak to hold the bowl steady. Around them, taverns spill laughter and lamplight, but the alley is quieter than a graveyard at midnight. Jory presses the coin into the old man's palm, feeling the tremor of gratitude travel straight. Port Royal, 1721. 3 bells past midnight. The harbor stank of tar, rum, and yesterday's fish guts. Jory Flint pressed his skinny shoulder against the splintered mast of the Serpent's Kiss, feeling the ship breathe beneath him like a great, caged animal. He was 11, hollow-eyed, and small enough to slip through the gaps adults never noticed. His bare feet stuck to the deck with every step. The planks were still warm from the Caribbean sun that had baked them all day. Captain Elias Red Hand Drake prowled the quarterdeck, coat flaring like a black sail. Moonlight silvered the scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. A scar he said he'd earned kissing the wrong governor's wife. The crew called him Red Hand because the fingers of his right glove were always stained with someone else's blood. Tonight they were dark up to the knuckles. Jory's job was simple. Stay invisible, carry powder, and don't drop the slow match. If the match went out, Red Hand had promised to light the next fuse with Jory's hair. The boy believed him. He'd seen worse done for less. Below deck, the air was thick enough to chew. Salt sweat, wet hemp, and the sweet rot smell of mangoes rolling in the hold. Jory balanced on a beam no wider than his wrist, arms full of cartridge bags heavier than he was. 1 foot wrong and he'd tumble into the bilge water that lapped ankle deep and stank of rats. That was when he heard the coughing. It came from the darkest corner of the hold, where the lantern barely reached. A wet, ragged sound, like a saw biting through wet pine. Jory set the bags down. Quiet, and crept closer. An old man lay curled against the hull, one sleeve pinned neatly where an arm used to be. His beard was the color of storm clouds, and his eyes were closed, but every cough shook him like a cannon's recoil. Jory knew him, Silas Crow, the ship's carpenter before the French took his hand and Red Hand took his berth. Now Silas lived on scraps and rainwater, carving tiny wooden birds no one ever bought. The crew called him Broken Sparrow and used his carvings for target practice. The boy crouched. "You sick, mister?" Silas opened one eye, pale as driftwood. "Sick of breathing, maybe?" His voice was soft, cracked. "Should have let that cannonball finish the job." Jory's stomach growled loud enough to echo. He hadn't eaten since sunrise. Just a heel of bread and a gulp of water the cook spat in. Yet his fingers found the small leather pouch at his neck, the one his mother had sewn from her old apron. Inside lay a single silver coin, warm from his skin. It was the last thing she'd pressed into his hand before the fever took her. Her wedding coin, polished thin by years of worry. He hesitated. The coin could buy bread for a week. It could buy a knife or a new pair of boots, or the mercy of the quartermaster who sold extra rations for silver. But Silas's lips were blue, and the coughing sounded worse. Jory slipped the coin free, caught the lantern light and flashed like a tiny star. He pressed it into Silas's good hand, curling the old man's fingers around it. "For your boy in Bristol," Jory whispered, repeating what he'd overheard the carpenter say once in his sleep. "Tell him pirates ain't all monsters." Silas stared at the coin as if it might burn him. A tear cut a clean line through the grime on his cheek. "You'll need this more than me, lad." "I need a story more," Jory said. "And you're the only one who tells them." A smile ghosted across the old man's face. "Then listen close." He tucked the coin into a hidden pocket inside his coat, close to his heart. "One day, when the gallows creak and the drums stop rolling, remember this moment. Coins travel farther than ships, boy. They circle the world and come back with interest." Above their heads, boots thundered on the deck. Red Hand's voice cracked like a whip. "Powder monkey, where in the 7 hells is my slow match?" Jory scrambled up the ladder, heart hammering. He didn't see Silas watch him go. Didn't see the old man kiss the coin and mouth a promise to the dark. That night, the Serpent's Kiss slipped her moorings and vanished into the moonlit channel. Jory stood at the rail, barefoot still, tasting salt and destiny. Somewhere behind him, Silas hummed an old Bristol lullaby, the silver coin warm against his chest like a second heartbeat. Neither of them knew that the coin would cross oceans, buy freedom, build ships, and one day return to this very spot, glowing beneath a gallows at sunrise, ready to repay a debt no hanging could ever settle. Subscribe now, because the tide that carried Jory away is already turning toward the day that coin saves them both. The horizon cracked open with cannon fire at dawn. Jory Flint felt the deck of the Serpent's Kiss buck like a wounded horse. Splinters the size of daggers whistled past his ears. The mainsail erupted in flames. Somewhere amid the smoke, Red Hand's voice rose in a roar of fury and disbelief. Royal Navy. 2 frigates off the starboard bow. Brace for broadside. Through the haze, Jory counted the enemy flags, 3, no, for white sails bearing the Crimson Cross of England. His stomach turned to ice. No pirate crew, no matter how desperate, could outrun that. The Serpent's Kiss was fast, but she was also heavy with Spanish gold and wounded men. A second salvo tore through the foremast. The ship lurched, and Jory stumbled against the rail. Silas Crow appeared beside him, coat singed, eyes wide with a look Jory hadn't seen since the night the French took his arm. "They've boxed us in," Silas rasped. "Only way out is through the reef, and that reef will gut us faster than cannonballs." Jory's mind raced. Behind them lay the open sea, certain death beneath naval guns. Ahead lay the Devil's Teeth, a line of jagged coral that had shredded hulls for centuries. The reef was a graveyard of ships, their bones whitening beneath crystal water. Captain Red Hand limped across the deck, blood seeping through a bandage on his thigh. His eyes found Jory. "Quartermaster," he growled, "we got 2 choices. Fight and die, or run the reef and maybe die slower." The crew held their breath. 38 souls, all eyes on Jory. He felt the weight of every story Silas had told him, of men who chose glory over survival, of boys who became legends or cautionary tales. Then the 3rd frigate appeared. It sailed straight toward them, flying a white flag. A single trumpet blast echoed across the water. A voice, magnified by a speaking trumpet, carried over the waves. "Jory Flint, surrender the Serpent's Kiss and all aboard shall be pardoned, save one. You alone will face the gallows for piracy." Silence swallowed the deck. The crew exchanged glances. A pardon for all but their quartermaster, the boy who'd once fed a beggar with his last coin. Red Hand's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for Jory. "They want your head, lad, but I'll not give it. We fight together or we run together." Jory looked at Silas. The old carpenter stepped forward, the silver coin glinting in his palm. The same coin Jory had given him years ago. "I can buy us time," Silas said quietly. "There's a hidden channel through the reef, narrow as a coffin and twice as deadly. I charted it once, long ago, but only one ship can pass at a time." He held up the coin. "This coin saved me. Let it save you now. I'll stay behind, draw their fire while you run." The crew erupted in protest. Voices clashed like steel. Some shouted to fight, others to flee. Above them, the frigates adjusted their sails, forming a crescent moon of death. Jory's choice crystallized. Fight. Every man dies, but they die free. Run. The crew lives, but he abandons Silas to cannon fire. Red Hand stepped closer. "I'll follow whichever course you choose. But choose now, the wind is shifting." The reef loomed ahead like broken dragon's teeth. Behind, the frigate's gun ports opened like hungry mouths. Jory closed his eyes. He saw his mother's fevered face, the coin warm in her palm. He saw Silas carving tiny wooden birds by candlelight. He saw the gallows at Port Royal empty and waiting. He opened his eyes. "Ready the reef charts," he said. "We run." But as the crew scrambled to obey, a final trumpet blast shattered the air. "Time's up, Flint. Surrender or we fire." The first cannon boomed. The deck exploded beneath Jory's feet. Splinters flew like arrows. A body, he couldn't tell whose, slammed into the rail and toppled overboard. Through the smoke, Silas pressed the coin into Jory's hand. "For luck," he whispered. "And for love." The Serpent's Kiss turned hard toward the reef, sails straining, timbers groaning. Behind her, the frigates opened fire in earnest. Jory stood at the helm, coin clenched in his fist, the Devil's Teeth rising like a wall of white fangs. Would you run the reef and risk every soul aboard? Or would you surrender yourself and pray the Navy keeps its word? Comment your choice below, because in the next 60 seconds, the sea itself will decide. The reef swallowed the Serpent's Kiss whole. Coral claws raked her keel with a scream of tortured wood. The foremast snapped like a twig and crashed across the deck, pinning 2 men beneath a tangle of rigging. Salt spray blinded them all. Jory clung to the helm, knuckles white. The silver coin pressed so hard into his palm it left a perfect imprint of the king's face. Behind them, the Royal Navy frigates slowed, unwilling to follow into the devil's teeth. Their cannons fell silent, confident the reef would finish what they had started. Sailors lined the rails, watching the pirate ship bleed into the turquoise shallows. On the Serpent's Kiss, chaos reigned. Men shouted prayers and curses in equal measure. The wounded begged for water they no longer had. Red Hand Drake lay against the shattered wheelhouse, a splinter the size of a marlinspike buried deep in his thigh, blood pooling beneath his boot. Jory looked at the coin. His mother's wedding coin, Silas's salvation, the last silver circle of hope he possessed, and knew it was time. He stepped onto the rail, arms raised. "I surrender." His voice cracked across the water like a musket shot. "Take me. Spare my crew." Silence. Then a trumpet blast from the lead frigate. A longboat launched, oars flashing in the rising sun. Jory watched it approach, every stroke a countdown. Silas limped to his side, face gray. "You don't have to do this, lad. We can still fight." Jory smiled, a small, sad thing. "Fighting bought us time. Mercy buys them life." He pressed the coin into Silas's palm. "Give this to the next soul who needs it more than we do." Silas closed his fingers around the silver disc, tears cutting channels through the soot on his cheeks. The longboat scraped alongside. Royal Marines swarmed aboard, muskets leveled. Iron shackles snapped around Jory's wrists. He offered no resistance. As they led him away, the crew of the Serpent's Kiss stood in silent salute, fists pressed to hearts. Even Red Hand managed a nod, pride and sorrow mingling in his eyes. Back on the frigate, Commodore Hawthorne waited on the quarterdeck, expression unreadable. "You're a fool, Flint," the Commodore said, "but an honorable one. Your crew will be transported, not hanged. You alone face the gallows." Jory bowed his head. "It's a fair trade." But as the Marines pushed him toward the brig, Commodore Hawthorne raised a hand. "Hold!" From the hold of the frigate emerged a man Jory had never expected to see again. Governor Aldridge of Port Royal, resplendent in gold-trimmed coat, flanked by a dozen clerks carrying ledgers and scrolls. Aldridge stepped forward, eyes sharp but not unkind. 15 years ago, the governor began, voice carrying across the deck, a beggar named Silas Crow came to my office. He carried a silver coin and a petition signed by every tavern keeper, every washerwoman, every dockhand in Port Royal. They spoke of a boy who'd given his last coin to a starving stranger. That boy, they said, deserved mercy more than judgment. He paused, letting the words sink in. That coin bought Silas a small stake in a merchant venture. That venture prospered. Silas Crow became the wealthiest man in the Caribbean. And every year, on the anniversary of the gift, he sent a single silver coin to the governor's office with the same message. "When you find the boy who gave this, grant him pardon." Aldridge held up a leather pouch. Inside, 15 silver coins gleamed like captured stars. "Today, Silas Crow bought your freedom, Jory Flint. Every man aboard the Serpent's Kiss is pardoned. Every charge dropped. You sail under letter of marque now, privateers in service of the crown." The deck erupted. Sailors cheered. Marines lowered their muskets. Red Hand laughed despite the pain, blood and tears mixing on his weathered cheeks. Jory stood stunned, the shackles suddenly lighter than air. Silas stepped forward, placing the original coin back into Jory's palm. "It came home," the old carpenter said, simply, "just like I promised." Later, as the Serpent's Kiss, now flying the royal colors, limped into Port Royal Harbor, the townspeople lined the docks. Children waved scraps of black silk painted with white doves. Merchants rang church bells. Tavern keepers poured free rum. At sunset, Jory and Silas stood on the pier where it had all begun. The coin lay between them, warm from their joined hands. "Funny," Jory murmured. A single coin bought my life twice. Silas smiled, eyes bright. Kindness travels farther than any ship. Today it brought you home. Tomorrow, who knows where it'll sail? Behind them, the Serpent's Kiss creaked at anchor, her wounds bandaged, her flag changed, her crew singing songs of redemption. And somewhere in the crowd, a small boy watched with wide eyes, clutching a single copper penny. Subscribe, fellow voyager, because the coin's journey isn't over. Somewhere beyond the sunset, it's already spinning toward the next soul who'll need its silver promise. Night folded over Port Royal like a velvet sail, and the coin spun once more, this time in the lamplight of the Crow's Nest Tavern. Jory Flint pressed it flat against the scarred table, silver warm from his palm, faces of kings and queens worn smooth by 15 years of journeys. Around him, the crew of the Serpent's Kiss, now proudly flying the Royal Dove, raised tankards of free rum and sang shanties that tasted of salt and redemption. Silas Crow sat opposite, carving a new token from driftwood, a tiny ship with wings instead of sails. Outside, church bells tolled midnight. Inside, laughter echoed off beams blackened by centuries of smoke. Every man present had once been condemned. Tonight they were celebrated. Yet Jory's gaze drifted past the revelry, past the open door where moonlight painted silver paths across the cobblestones. A small boy hovered at the threshold, barefoot, wide-eyed, clutching a single copper penny like a lifeline. His clothes were rags. His ribs counted every breath. Jory recognized the hunger, the fear, the stubborn spark that refused to die. Silas followed his gaze and smiled. The coin's not done sailing, lad. Jory rose, legs steady for the first time in years. The tavern quieted as he crossed the floor, boots soft against sawdust. He knelt before the boy, bringing himself to child height. "What's your name, sailor?" The boy's voice was a whisper. "Elias." Jory's heart stuttered. He glanced at Silas, who nodded, eyes bright. "That's a good name," Jory said. "Strong name. Names can carry you across oceans." He held out the silver coin. Moonlight caught the king's profile and turned it into a promise. This coin once bought a boy's life twice. Tonight it's looking for a third voyage. But every voyage needs a captain. Elias stared, afraid to touch it. Jory pressed it gently into the boy's palm, closing tiny fingers around the silver. "Take it to the docks at sunrise. Find the ship with white doves on her sails. Tell them Jory Flint sent you. They'll ask where you want to go. You tell them, wherever kindness is needed most." The boy's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of sudden, impossible possibility. Behind them, Silas lifted his fresh-carved token. "And take this, so you remember. Wings are just sails with dreams attached." The tavern erupted in cheers, but the sound felt distant, like waves receding. Jory stood, ruffling the boy's tangled hair. "One last thing," he said, voice carrying just enough to reach every ear. "When you find someone hungrier than yourself, pass the coin on. Let it keep sailing. Let kindness keep circling the globe." Silas raised his tankard. "To the coin that never drops." The crew echoed, "To the coin that never drops." Outside, the moon hung low and full, a silver coin tossed into the sky. Inside, Elias clutched his treasure and felt, for the first time, the weight of wings. A hush fell. Jory turned to face the room. 15 years ago, I gave away a single silver circle and thought I'd lost everything. Tonight I see I gained the world. Thank you for sailing this far with me." He paused, eyes scanning faces. Crew, townsfolk, strangers drawn by the legend. But every ending is just another horizon. Tomorrow, Elias boards the Mercy's Reward. Where she docks next is up to you. He pointed to a small wooden box on the bar, painted with the same dove emblem, lid open. "Drop your answer inside. North to ice and whales? East to Spice Islands? South to deserts of gold? The route with the most votes becomes our next voyage. Your comment charts the course." A ripple of excitement spread. Men leaned forward, women whispered, children tugged sleeves. The room buzzed with possibility. Jory smiled, soft and sure. As for me, I'll be at the helm, because a promise once made must always be kept. And somewhere beyond this harbor, another coin is already spinning, another heart already breaking, another story already beginning. He lifted his own tankard. To every kindness that circles back, to every stranger who becomes family, to every viewer who chooses to sail on. The crew drank deep. Outside, the first star winked above the mastheads like a lighthouse for wanderers. Camera lingers on Elias, small hand tight around Silver, eyes wide with tomorrow. Fade to black. Text appears, gentle as tide. Comment your chosen destination. The winning route becomes our next adventure. Tap subscribe, because the coin's journey is far from over, and the next miracle might have your name on it. Soft shanty plays.